Over the last 5 years, powerlifters have definitely been one of the populations I have worked with the most. Anywhere from world-class powerlifters to people just getting their feet on the ground within the sport. When it comes to being successful in powerlifting, yes, a lot of it is genetic, a lot of it is good programming and work ethic, but a lot of it is also staying healthy longer. Because if you can stay injury-free longer, you don't have to spend time backing off and rehabbing and getting back to where you were. So in my opinion, staying healthy is one of the best ways that you can become very successful at the higher levels of powerlifting. Even if you're not injured, I think that this is still a very helpful video to help supplement your training, to help fill in your accessory blocks with some exercises. When it comes to improving how powerlifters feel, there's some good news and there's some bad news. The bad news is that they are obviously extremely tight. They have years and years of adaptations and compressing themselves and squeezing themselves. And that's very much necessary for their sport, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But it's to be expected that it's going to take a little bit of time for us to decompress this system and be able to help improve mobility and movement options. The good news is that the overwhelming majority of them tend to have very similar presentations, and they tend to have very similar issues. That doesn't mean there aren't individual differences, but what it does mean is that I feel pretty comfortable making a video that can be generalized to a lot of powerlifters because I see so many commonalities here. Because primarily powerlifters and powerlifting coaches are going to be watching this video, I don't need to tell you that powerlifters are used to doing the same thing on both sides of their body at the same time with a ton of weight. And again, this is not a bad thing, but over time, this can lead to a loss of variability within the system. In order to lift a large amount of load, you have to move through orientation of your body, which is the pelvis moving as one unit, the rib cage moving as one unit, and we're locked in the sagittal plane of front, back, up, down movements. This right here is relative movement, and it can occur in so many different ways, but it's really segments of the pelvis moving within each other. So that could be this or this, it could be this or this. However, the more we lose our movement options and variability, the more we are going to move like this. And that's why so many powerlifters walk around as if they are sort of this refrigerator-like gait pattern where they're not really dissociating between sides of their body. They're just orienting their whole body in space as they go forward. What I tend to see pretty much every time is that these powerlifters are going to be incredibly extended, where they have a large amount of anterior pelvic tilt, they're going to be compressed front to back, and they're basically squeezed like a pancake. So if I got a lot of compression from both angles here, from the front and the back, then I'm going to flatten myself out. Let's use Diego, and Diego is a perfect example of a powerlifter who's going to present on the table in assessments like a powerlifter. I'm going to expect to see about 90 degrees of hip flexion. I'm going to expect to see less than 90 degrees of shoulder flexion. Their straight leg raise is going to be less than 45 degrees in many cases. Their hip external rotation is going to be better than their hip internal rotation, and they're also going to present with just a lot of restricted mobility all across the board. But again, that is usually what is necessary for them to move through orientation and be very strong. The reason why so many powerlifters have more external rotation than internal rotation is that what ends up happening is as they go forward, initially those femurs are biased towards more internal rotation. But because they're squeezed from front to back, what ends up happening is they get pushed forward like that. And I'm exaggerating this pelvic motion, by the way. What you end up seeing is that this femur slides forward into compensatory external rotation. Now that's what's happening systemically on both sides of their body. However, there are these individual side-to-side differences. And what I see a lot of the times is they have these pretty exaggerated left AIC, right BC patterns, which is that natural human asymmetrical pattern that we see where the right hip is higher and we tend to see a lower right shoulder where we're kind of just sitting in our right hip. A lot of them also really struggle to shift over to their left side because in this normal asymmetrical pattern, we see a left side that is a little bit more forward than the right. So as we go more and more forward on both sides, the left side tends to get even more pushed forward. So they have a harder time shifting left, but they can shift right a lot easier in most cases. So what we often see is people who have these right hip shifts in their squats and to a lesser extent their deadlifts, but that doesn't mean there aren't left hip shifts as well. These absolutely do happen. It's just an additional layer of compensation, but more often we're going to see this right side hip shift. So there's a process and a checklist I go through with powerlifters. The first thing is that how far away are you from a meet? Are you in the off season? Are you in prep? What's going on? And based off of that, we have a couple of options. Let's say we're getting close to a meet. This can be a little bit more challenging because we're not able to reduce the training load and we're not able to reduce the workload that this person is being exposed to. So what's probably going to win? All of that weight on the barbell or a couple of these repositioning drills? And that's not to say that they don't have a meaningful effect. I've seen the claim many times that these drills that you could see on my channel or other quote-unquote corrective exercises don't actually have a meaningful effect when the stimulus is so high in the weight room. And that's just not true. I absolutely agree that their training stimulus is going to outweigh what they're getting exposed to within these drills, but what these drills can do is help open up space, and they can do that really effectively if they're executed properly and it's the right drill for them. But we can't really expect miracles to occur every time. It's going to be harder because that stimulus is going to be interfered with. It's going to be much harder, but some of these drills are definitely better than none at all. However, if we're further away from a meet, we have so much more opportunity to make more long-term changes because we can back off the load a little bit. We can introduce more single leg training. We can introduce a lot more variability. And the number one thing that helps these powerlifters more than anything else is rotation, getting rotation back, because they are so locked in the sagittal plane, forward, back, up, down, that they're not getting much rotation. So getting rotation in both their pelvis and their rib cage is going to be a great starting point. First thing I want to do is decompress that pelvis and rib cage. I want them to be able to expand their rib cage instead of just pushing volume of air and pressure forward into their belly. And then after that, I want to go and restore a little bit more of that asymmetry that could be exaggerated. With getting rotation back, we need to expand the rib cage in more directions than just pushing volume of air down into our belly like we do in a lot of the bracing strategies that you see. We want to make sure that we can get the pelvis to come back on both sides. This is the short seated breathing with the left arm reach from Postural Restoration Institute. The purpose of this is to expand the left back with air and shut off the posterior neck on both sides. So to set up for this, we are up against a wall. In this position, we have a good degree of hip bend and knee bend right here, but our feet are flat on both sides. And we have just the mid back on the wall here. The upper back here is off the wall. The low back here is off the wall. So both are going to be rounded. To start here, we're going to exhale and reach forward with both arms at an equal length. If you would like, you can rest your arms up against your knees or just slightly on top of them. We got to make sure that the shoulders stay out of the ears. We don't want to shrug up, we want to keep them down. So now we have a lot of flexion and rounding in the back, but the mid back is still up against the wall, the low back is off, the upper back is off. The head is going to be forward a little bit and slightly down. Now we're going to inhale and reach just the left arm a little bit further forward with the right, but the right keeps reaching. But just now the left hand is ahead. And as we inhale through the nose, exhale, soft sigh with a big open mouth. It's like a faucet. If we're here, we're not going to get as much air out, but we want to open up the faucet, sigh it out so we can get as much air out as we possibly can. We're going to feel those abdominals engage specifically on the side, and we're going to hold that as we inhale through our nose, reach a little bit further with the left every time. If you cannot reach the left anymore forward, at least have the intention to, and that will help open up the left side. You're going to feel stretch in your upper back when you inhale. Just make sure that you're getting a full exhale, feeling those side abs engage a little bit, holding on to them a little bit as you inhale. Reach the left just slightly more forward. This is the 90-90 supported alternating crossover from Postural Restoration Institute. The purpose of this activity is to recruit some hamstring on the stance leg side and some obliques on the side that we're reaching with, and integrate those two muscles together in a 90-90 position. So to set up for this, we obviously, as the name suggests, want to be in a 90-90 position, 90 degrees of bend here at the knee and also the hip. And then we want to feel our whole foot flat on a wall. So we want to be feeling the ball of the big toe, the little toe right here, not the actual toes up here, but right where the ball of the foot is, and also the heel here. And then what we want to do is start in a position where we're creating a pelvic tuck with our hamstrings. So we want to pull down with our heels primarily and think about lifting one vertebrae at a time off of the ground. That will help recruit these hamstrings on both sides. Now, Trevor, what I want you to do is extend one leg, pull the toes back, and now he's going to feel way more hamstring on this leg right here on the wall. Take your hand on the left and reach it for those toes on the right, but make sure your head stays down on the ground. Exhale all that air out until you feel these side abs on the left engage, the obliques. And then hold that slight compression in the obliques as you inhale through the nose, and that will expand your rib cage in the front and the back. All the while feeling this left hamstring work, feeling these 2 points of contact here, but also particularly the heel on the left as well. We also need the obliques to help control the tilt of that pelvis, but this is where things get tricky. Because powerlifters are so far forward, they tend to have a really hard time feeling their obliques. If they're not gonna get their obliques after that full exhale, they're gonna have a really hard time getting air to expand their rib cage, because when they inhale, it's just going to want to go forward. So we gotta make sure that powerlifters can find their obliques, and that's gonna be a really important step. And this can actually be more tricky than it sounds. I actually had a powerlifter last week where I'm working with her online, and for the longest time I thought that she was feeling her obliques, but because it's online training, I'm not right there with her. I'll say, do you feel your side abs? And she'll say yes. But her perception of what side abs were actually back here in her QLs. So there was an awareness of what her obliques really were, because she's so far forward and they're so elongated, they're so disadvantaged in their position to control the pelvis. So what I like to do first is get them to feel their obliques through just straight up side plank positions, or just positions where they have no choice but to feel their obliques. And here's one way we can do that. So in order to set up for this activity, you want to be at a perfect 90-90 bend at both your knees and your hips. Your elbow is directly underneath your shoulder, and the palm is turned up towards the ceiling. Now, this is the really important part. We've got to be able to create sort of this rainbow shape underneath this side ab right here. So I'm going to push through my knees and that elbow, and I'm going to really get high here. I'm going to feel a ton of left oblique. Now I want to take this right hand, whatever hand's on top, reach it down about 45-degree angle towards the floor, and then I'm going to exhale, big open mouth sigh, pause, inhale through my nose, exhale. The number one mistake I see people make on this activity is they overextend their low back. Remember, we're trying to get the obliques to control pelvic tilt. So when we're up here, make sure you're not getting tired and starting to arch your back. Keep these ribs down, nice, but not too much, like this. Stay nice and stacked. Make sure you're feeling those obliques, and you should feel zero low back. If we have someone that's quite asymmetrical, and let's say they're here where a lot of people are, but they're forward on both sides, they're going to have a pretty hard time shifting into their left hip if they're still forward on both sides. So bringing them back first and then getting them to shift left is often the best strategy. This is the standing supported posterior capsule stretch from Postural Restoration Institute. The purpose of this is to get us to shift into our hip a lot more effectively. So what we're going to do here is set up with some sort of table object which is around waist height, and we have a book or something that's about 1 to 2 inches thick underneath our left side, our left foot. Now the book needs to be long enough that the whole foot can be flat. Now what we're going to do is, with our feet parallel and hip width apart, is we're going to place our hands on this table, or in this case the plow box, and I want Trevor to round his back and tuck his hips. Good, just like that. Now he's going to shift his left hip back. So he needs to do that by pushing his right knee forward and pushing his hips back and off to the side on the left, and he's going to push his left knee slightly in. Now his feet are in the same place, but he should feel his left inner thigh engage, and he's going to feel most of his weight on this left heel here, but his whole foot is flat. On the right side, he has about 30-ish% of his weight, and it's just kind of hanging out there with the right knee going forward, feeling that right foot arch. Now, what I want you to do, Trevor, is keep your back rounded, keep to the left on that left heel, and exhale and squat down maybe 20 to 30 degrees. And once he gets to that position where he feels like he might start to lose it, again, just 20, 30 degrees, he's just gonna hold that position. And he's gonna breathe in through his nose, out through his mouth. Now, as he breathes out through his mouth, he's going to feel these left side abs engage. I want him to hold those left side abs as he inhales through his nose. And then he should really feel his right side open up. So in this bottom position, you know you're doing it right. If you feel your left inner thigh, your left heel, whole foot flat, maybe some left outside hip, and for some people, they're going to feel a big posterior capsule stretch on this left side in their left back pocket. The most common mistake in this activity is that people will not get their hip to the left enough. So we want this hip right here slightly outside this knee right here. So he should be able to do that without losing his whole foot flat on the left. And also, we want to make sure we're slightly side bent to the left, just a little bit. And then, in addition to that, people will start to lose it as they go down. So as they go down, they'll start to actually shift more right like that. We need to make sure we're shifting left still as we go down, pushing our left knee in as we go down, which is ultimately just going to keep the left knee in line with the left big toe. What I recommend is that powerlifters do somewhere between 2 to 3 sets of 5 breaths on the drills that work best for them, and definitely do 1 to 2 sets of 5 breaths after you're done training, because that will allow your nervous system to downregulate. That's going to take the extension tone out of your body a little bit. That'll allow you to have more movement options for the rest of the day. Now, this video wouldn't be complete if we didn't talk about some accessory exercises. We really want to make sure that we are promoting rotation when possible. And it's not like these exercises are going to be completely rehabilitation focused. We can still get a little bit of load and stimulus to the tissues that we want, but we can still do it in a way that's going to allow us to get some movement back and some rotation back. I like exercises like alternating rows for this. When it comes to the pelvis now, single leg exercises are key, but they're really key in terms of how we need to set up the foot positions. We need to make sure both feet are flat on the ground, because if one foot is off of the ground, we're going to be more biased towards moving through orientation. We want both feet referenced against something. You can do this in a wall reference split squat. You could do this in a staggered stance deadlift position, which I really like for powerlifters. To avoid making this video an hour long, I'm going to put in the description a link to the article I'm writing alongside this video. It'll have all the exercises I'm talking about in it with very thorough walkthroughs. And as I've touched on a couple of times already, we really need to make sure that we're managing our training load efficiently and effectively and responsibly. If we are going to just keep pushing on through, there has to be the expectation that things aren't going to stick as well. But if we can back off for a couple of weeks and we can reduce the load and we can really focus on the unilateral aspect of things, that will allow us to train this action coming back. And that is so, so important for powerlifters.